Jake Carter stood quietly near the edge of the Great Hall. The Velari Palace was big and full of shining lights, tall walls, and strange statues. Everything around him looked different from Earth. He had never seen anything like it. The floor was smooth like glass, and the walls changed color slowly, glowing in soft blue and purple. Jake had only been on this alien world for 2 days, and he already felt like he was inside a dream. He was part of Earth's first group sent to meet the Velari Empire. The people said the Velari were powerful, old, and proud. They ruled many planets and had many rules. Jake was a translator. He had studied alien languages since he was young. He was not a soldier or leader. He just wanted to help. The other members of the Earth's team were busy in meetings with Velari leaders. Jake finished his work early and got curious. He decided to walk around the palace. He knew it was not the best idea, but the halls were open and quiet, and no one stopped him. Maybe he could learn more about their culture by looking around. He turned left, then right, then walked down a long hallway with golden doors. Each door had symbols on it, but Jake did not understand them. He looked at one door that had small flowers drawn around the edges. It was half open. Jake thought it might be a study room or maybe a garden space. He stepped inside without knocking. The room was bright and warm. Light came from the ceiling like soft sunlight. Then he saw them. 3 tall women, all with glowing skin and long silver hair, stood inside. They wore thin, shining robes and looked very surprised. One of them, the tallest, stared at Jake with wide eyes and shouted in their language. Jake froze. He realized what had happened. This was not a study room. This was a dressing room. And these were not just any women. They were the Velari princesses. The guards came fast. 2 of them grabbed Jake's arms before he could speak. The tallest princess pointed at him and spoke in a strong, angry voice. Jake did not understand all the words, but he knew she was upset. They pulled him out of the room and took him down another hall. He tried to explain, but they did not listen. He kept saying it was a mistake. He did not mean to enter the room, but the guards stayed silent. Their faces looked hard and cold. They brought him to a small holding room. It was clean but empty, with only a chair and a table. Jake sat down and put his hands on the table. His heart was beating fast. He felt sick. He had only wanted to explore and learn. Now he'd made a big mistake. A very big mistake. He thought about Earth. What if this small mistake caused trouble between the 2 worlds? What if the Velari thought humans were rude or careless? Jake knew that one wrong move could hurt the talks between Earth and the Velari Empire. He waited in silence for a long time. Then the door opened. The guard stepped in and told him that the queen herself would see him. Jake stood up slowly. His hands were shaking. He followed the guard through more long halls. As he walked, he tried to stay calm. He repeated the words he would say. He would tell them the truth. He did not mean harm. He just got lost. He hoped the queen would understand. At last they reached a large door. It opened slowly, and Jake stepped inside. The room was huge, with silver walls and a high ceiling. At the far end, on a glowing throne, sat Queen Thalara of the Velari. Beside her stood the 3 princesses. The tallest one, who had shouted at Jake, looked straight at him. Her face showed no kindness. Jake walked forward. Many eyes watched him. He felt small and out of place, but he took a deep breath and stood tall. He knew this would be the hardest moment of his life. Jake stood in the middle of the royal hall. His hands were by his sides, and he tried not to look afraid. Queen Thalara looked at him with sharp eyes. Her long silver hair flowed down her shoulders, and her gown shimmered like water in the sun. The 3 princesses stood near her throne. Tallest one, Princess Celia, kept her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on Jake. The other 2, Princess Lyra and Princess Valana, whispered to each other. A guard stepped forward and spoke to the queen. He told her what had happened. Jake could not understand all the words, but he heard his name and the word dressing room more than once. People around the hall began to talk quietly among themselves. Queen Thalara raised her hand, and the room fell silent. She looked at Jake. Her voice was clear and calm. Do you understand the trouble you have caused? Jake bowed his head. Do, Your Majesty. But I did not mean to enter that room. I was lost. I did not know what it was. Princess Celia stepped forward. You entered a place forbidden to outsiders, she said. You saw things you had no right to see. You dishonored our family. Jake looked up at her. I swear it was not on purpose. I thought it was a garden or a study. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The queen sat in silence for a moment, and she said, "Words are not enough. In our world, actions show truth." A tall man in dark clothes stepped forward. He was a royal advisor. He spoke of a tradition called the right of apology. It was an old way to prove respect and honesty. The person must face a trial alone and come out with honor. If they failed, they would be seen as unworthy. The hall grew tense. People whispered again. Some thought it was too harsh. Others nodded in agreement. Jake listened and felt fear rise in his chest. But he also knew this was his only chance. He looked at the queen and said, "I will do it. I'll face the trial." Queen Velari nodded. "So be it. You will begin the rite of apology at sunrise tomorrow." The guards led Jake back to the holding room. This time, the door was not locked. He sat down on the floor, thinking about what had just happened. He had never heard of such a trial. What would it be like? Would he have to fight something? Would he be trapped? Later that night, an old Velari man came to speak with him. He was the keeper of the trial. He explained that the trial would take place in a crystal maze deep under the palace. The maze changed shape on its own. Inside were tests of mind and body. Some rooms would have puzzles, some would have danger. Jake would be watched at all times. "Do not try to break the rules," the man said. "The maze knows." Jake nodded. "I understand." The next morning, before the sun rose, Jake was taken to the start of the maze. The walls glowed faintly in the dark. The queen and her daughters watched from above. Princess Lyra looked worried. She turned to her sister and said, "What if he fails?" Princess Celia did not answer. Jake stepped into the maze. The door behind him closed with a low sound. He was alone now. The light around him was soft, but enough to see. The walls looked like clear glass, but felt like stone. The path ahead split into three. He chose the middle path and walked forward. Soon he came to a room with symbols on the wall and a strange sound in the air. He looked at the symbols and smiled. He had studied these before. He pressed one of them, and a door opened. He moved ahead carefully. In the next room, he found a small creature with a broken leg. It was not part of the test, he thought. But it looked at him with big eyes, and he could not leave it there. He picked it up gently and carried it with him. Far above, the queen and the princesses watched. The room had many screens showing what was happening inside. He helped the creature, Princess Velari said. Princess Celia watched in silence. Her eyes stayed on Jake's face as he walked forward, deeper into the maze. Jake moved deeper into the maze, holding the small creature in his arms. The creature made soft sounds, but it did not try to escape. It had large, round eyes and a smooth body that glowed faintly. Jake looked at it and smiled. He whispered, "You'll be okay. I won't leave you." The next room was darker. The walls had strange shapes moving across them. Jake walked slowly. His boots made soft sounds on the crystal floor. In the center of the room stood a tall column. A voice echoed around him in the Velari language. "Solve the balance of light and shadow. It's only then will the way open." Jake looked around and saw panels on the wall. Some gave off light, others stayed dark, thought hard. The puzzle seemed to need equal light on both sides of the room. He moved from panel to panel, pressing some and turning off others. After some time, the lights balanced and a door opened on the far wall. He passed through it and found a place to sit for a moment. The creature in his arms rested quietly. Jake felt tired, but he kept going. He knew that giving up was not an option. If he failed, Earth would look weak. He could not let that happen. Far above, Queen Velari watched with her court. She said nothing, but her eyes stayed on the screen. Princess Lyra whispered to her sister, "He is not like others. He is not proud." Princess Velari nodded. "He learns quickly." Princess Celia said nothing. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Back in the maze, Jake entered a narrow hallway. The walls began to shift behind him. He ran forward as the walls closed in. At the end of the hall, he found a narrow passage. He squeezed through it just in time. The next room was filled with mist. Could not see far ahead. The creature in his arms became nervous. Jake moved slowly, feeling the ground with each step. Then he heard a growl. a large beast stepped out of the mist. It had 6 legs and glowing red eyes. Its body was covered in thick scales. Jake backed away slowly. He placed the small creature behind a crystal block. He knew he could not fight the beast with strength. He looked around and saw shiny stones on the wall. He picked one up and threw it past the beast. The noise made the creature turn. Jake threw another stone in a different direction. The beast followed the sound. Using the moment, Jake led the small creature to the next door. He pressed his hand on the panel, and the door opened. He rushed inside and closed it behind him. He sat on the floor and took a deep breath. The small creature curled up beside him. Jake smiled. "We're still alive," he said. The screens in the royal chamber showed the moment clearly. The crowd was silent. Princess Lyra spoke softly. He did not harm the beast. He used his mind. The queen looked at her daughters. Honor does not come only from strength. In the maze, Jake reached the last room. A clear pool stood in the center. A stone bridge crossed over it. On the other side, a door waited. But halfway across the bridge was a figure. It was a Velari warrior, tall and dressed in silver armor. The warrior raised a long staff. "You must pass the final test," he said. "Face me with truth." Jake placed the small creature on the ground. He stood tall and walked forward. "I do not want to fight," Jake said. "I came here to show respect. I did not mean harm. I want peace between our worlds." The warrior lowered his staff. "And pass. You have spoken with heart." The door opened. Jake picked up the creature and walked through it. On the other side, light filled the room. He had passed the trial. When Jake stepped out of the maze, the royal court stood waiting. Queen Thalara gave a slow nod. Princess Lyra clapped her hands. Even Princess Celia gave a small look of surprise. Jake stood in the light, tired and covered in dust, but alive and proud. He had not only survived, he had earned respect. Jake stood in the middle of the grand hall. Bright lights above him made the floor shine like water. The Velari court watched him in silence. His clothes were dusty, and there were small cuts on his arms, but he stood straight. The small creature he had helped in the maze sat quietly beside him. Queen Thalara stood and raised her hand. "The trial is complete. You have passed." A low sound of voices filled the hall. Some were surprised. Others nodded in respect. Jake looked up at the queen and gave a small bow. He had not come here to be a hero. He just wanted to make peace. That night, Jake was given a new room in the palace. It was clean and bright. The small creature was taken to the healers. The guards were no longer cold to him. Some even gave him short nods as he passed. The next day, Queen Thalara invited Jake to a royal dinner. He was given clean clothes, simple but respectful. When he entered the great dining room, he saw many Velari nobles sitting at long tables. The walls showed moving lights like stars. The room was quiet when he entered, but the queen raised her hand and said, "Welcome, Jake Carter of Earth." He took his seat near the queen. Across the table sat the 3 princesses. Lyra smiled at him. Velana gave him a curious look. Celia did not smile, but she met his eyes without anger. During the meal, Jake listened more than he spoke. The food was strange, but not bad. He answered questions about Earth and its people. He talked about books, music, and cities. Some nobles were surprised that humans had stories just like Velari. Princess Lyra asked, "Why did you help that small creature in the maze? You could have left it." Jake replied, "Because it was hurt, and because it trusted me. I could not leave it behind." Lyra nodded slowly. Sleia spoke next. "You did not use weapons in the trial." "Why?" Jake looked at her. "Because I believe in using my mind first. Not everything must be solved with force." There was silence after that, but it was not cold. It was the silence of thinking. Later, the queen invited Jake to walk through the palace gardens. The trees glowed gently, and the sky above was full of stars. The air was soft and cool. Princess Celia walked beside him. She did not speak for a while, and she said, "I was angry when you entered that room. I thought you were careless. Now I see I judged too fast." Jake looked at her. "I was wrong to go into that hall. Should have been more careful. I did not mean disrespect." She nodded. "You showed respect in the trial. That means more than words." They walked in silence. Around them, flowers opened and closed slowly, glowing with soft colors. In the distance, music played from a quiet corner of the garden. Back in the court, news of Jake's trial and the dinner began to spread. Velari citizens spoke of the human who entered the forbidden room, faced the trial, and walked out with honor. Some called him brave, others called him lucky, and most began to respect him. On Earth, messages were sent from the Velari capital. The talks between the two worlds continued. The tension that had grown after the mistake started to fade. In the days that followed, Jake met with scholars, artists, and leaders. He asked questions. He listened. He shared ideas. People began to see him not as a stranger, but as someone who wanted to learn. Princess Velana said, "He is not like others. He wants to understand us." Princess Lyra smiled. "He makes us laugh." Even Princess Celia, who once wanted him punished, now spoke of him with respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall towers of the palace, Jake stood on a balcony and looked at the stars. He thought about how a simple mistake had brought him to this moment. He had been afraid. He had felt lost. But he had faced what came with courage. Now, a new path was opening in front of him. The palace was quiet as the stars shone high in the sky. Jake stood on a wide stone path lined with glowing trees. Their light changed slowly, from blue to green to soft gold. It was his last night on the Velari homeworld. Tomorrow, the ship from Earth would come to take him back. He had become a name many knew. It's not for being strong, but for being honest. It's not for fighting, but for choosing peace. The story of the human who entered the princess's dressing room by mistake and then faced a royal trial had spread far and wide. And the way he acted during the trial changed how many Velaris saw humans. Jake walked through the garden slowly. His thoughts were full. He had made mistakes, but he had also made something good out of them. He had not planned any of this. He had just followed what he believed was right. Soft sound came from behind him. He turned and saw Princess Celia. She wore a long robe that shimmered in the soft garden light. Her face looked calm. "I thought I might find you here," she said. Jake smiled. "It's hard to sleep. Too many thoughts." Celia walked beside him. They moved along the path in silence for a while. Then she spoke. "When you first came, I thought you were just another careless visitor. We have seen many who smile but do not respect us." "I understand," Jake said. "I made a mistake. I walked into a place I should not have. I did not know, but it was still my fault." She nodded. "You did something no one expected. You chose to take the trial and you faced it with heart. You earned what even some Velari have not." Jake looked at her. "Thank you. That means a lot." They stopped at a small bridge over a clear stream. The water below moved slowly, reflecting the stars. Celia looked down at it. "Do you think you will come back one day?" she asked. "If I can," Jake said. "There's still so much to learn, so many more questions to ask." Celia smiled for the first time. It was small, but real. "I think many here would be glad to see you again." They stood there for a while, saying nothing. The night wind moved gently around them. The next morning, the ship from Earth landed near the edge of the palace. Jake stood with Queen Thalara and her daughters. Many nobles had come to see him off. The queen stepped forward. "Jake, Carter of Earth, you came here as a guest. You leave as a friend." He bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not forget what I learned here." Princess Lyra gave him a small gift, a silver stone that changed color with touch. "So you remember us?" Princess Velana nodded. "And so we remember you." Celia stepped forward last. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. "Be careful, Jake, and remember, not all doors are what they seem." Jake laughed softly. "I will be very careful with doors from now on." He turned and walked to the ship. As he looked back one last time, he saw the three princesses standing side by side, gave a small wave, then entered the ship. The ship rose slowly into the sky. Below, the Velari world faded from view, but the memory of it stayed with Jake. The halls of crystal, the maze, the garden, the people, and the lesson that even mistakes can lead to something greater. Weeks later, back on Earth, Jake stood before a group of leaders and told his story. Told them about the trial, the court, the Velari way of thinking. He spoke not as a hero, but as someone who had learned respect. Because of him, talks between Earth and Velari grew stronger. More humans were invited to visit, and more Velari came to see Earth. Jake was given a new job, became a cultural ambassador, someone who helped both sides understand each other. He did it well, not with long speeches, but with simple words and honest actions. People remembered him not for what he saw, but for how he acted. And far away, on the glowing world of Velari, a princess sometimes walked through the garden and looked up at the stars. Thinking of the human who changed everything by opening the wrong door?